Kia ora and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm sorry that I can't be here in person, but I'm pleased to still have this opportunity to share a few thoughts on the changing construction landscape. As Minister for Building and Construction, I'm proud to support the work that you do as an industry to shape the literal building of our communities and supporting responsible development. Today I want to highlight two areas where the government is making meaningful progress to back you: waterproofing regulation and insulation flexibility. Let's start with supporting skilled practitioners and lifting standards in waterproofing. As you know, waterproofing is a highly skilled trade that is critical to the long-term durability and performance of our homes. Across New Zealand, thousands of professionals are doing excellent work, often in challenging conditions where precision and experience are essential. To support this work, MB is developing a new licence class under the Licensed Building Practitioner, or LBP regime, focused specifically on internal waterproofing. This will involve updating the definition of restricted building work so that waterproofing is carried out, or at least supervised, by a licensed professional. This change recognises the expertise already in the industry and gives consumers greater confidence in the people they hire. It also ties in with the government's broader efforts to enable granny flat exemptions, allowing small, standalone dwellings to be built without a building consent, as well as without a resource consent, provided that the work is done by a licensed professional. Currently, without a waterproofing licence, features like level entry showers and wet area bathrooms cannot be included under that exemption. By introducing this licence class, we are unlocking more design flexibility for homeowners while keeping standards front and centre. The sector has been clear in its support. In 2023, we consulted on the proposal following feedback from the 2021 LBP regime review. 79% of respondents backed the introduction of a waterproofing licence, including the changes to restricted building work. Officials are now working closely with the sector to draft the competencies for the new class. We expect it to be introduced in April next year, with an 18-month transition period for practitioners to apply. Estimates suggest that up to 7,500 installers across New Zealand could be eligible. While not all will apply, those who do will join a nationally recognised framework supporting quality, accountability and professional development. We are also exploring whether basement tanking could be included in this class. This is a positive step, reflecting the professionalism of the waterproofing industry and helping to ensure that New Zealand homes are built to last. Turning now to insulation, changes that I announced in July will ease costs for designers, builders and homeowners. The current one-size-fits-all approach has driven up costs and limited design flexibility, and it does not allow smart trade-offs such as adjusting window size, which of course, as we know, can improve overall energy efficiency. MB will remove the schedule method compliance pathway and replace it with more flexible alternatives. These new pathways support a whole-of-home approach to energy efficiency, giving builders and designers the freedom to deliver better outcomes available with the calculation and modelling methods. Of course, these changes will not compromise energy performance, and in fact they are expected to reduce the cost of a new build by up to $15,000 while maintaining current efficiency standards. This is a win for homeowners, a win for the industry, and a win for smarter building. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you today. The work that you do underpins the infrastructure and housing that New Zealanders rely on. Together, we're building a future that is more resilient, more efficient, and more responsive to the needs of our community. Ngā mihi nui, and thank you again for your hard work.
It's so good to learn we have the backing of the Minister, isn't it? So anyway, next up I would like to introduce Richard Almand. He's a registered architect who works with MBIE and the building performance team. Richard brings a wealth of knowledge on how regulations shape the industry that we're all part of.
Some chocolate bars for some questions which you want to be able to answer. Okay, so this presentation varies very slightly from what was in the program. I can actually touch on a little bit of stuff that Brendan also covered, so there's a little bit of a crossover here. But don't worry, it's called Internal Moisture in the Phantom Vents. It's going to Routinely on. Very often. So yeah, basically I want to talk to you guys, ask you for the support of the industry, and listen to your feedback. We want to talk about, I'll start off talking about why I think tiling and waterproofing is really, really important. And I think often it's undervalued. It's often takes a backseat to external weather tightness and fire issues and seismic strengthening issues. And then I want to talk a little bit about the building code and how it's developing and how it feels like we're finally going to get down to doing something about it. That's a short presentation. Yep, got it, sorry. This is a picture of me about 10 kilos ago. I used to work as an architect in quite a large architecture firm doing quite specialist healthcare, biolabs and other stuff. If anyone can guess where this is, they will get a bar of chocolate. I'll give you a clue, there's no tiles in the whole building. But that is no takers, that's Hayward's substation where they transfer the DC current coming from Benmore back into AC for the national grid. This is a team I work for. Sadly, some of these people are no longer with us. They're still alive, but they don't work at MP anymore. So this was taken actually at a Boyd's conference, and it was a great Gatsby thing. So our team, we have architects, building scientists, engineers, plumbers. There's about 14 of us, mostly engineers. And I say to people at barbecues or when you meet someone and they ask you what you do, I just basically say I twiddle the knobs on the building code, and it's the simplest way to kind of explain it to people, because that's pretty much what we're trying to do. So I've got a chocolate bar. If anyone can guess how these four things are related, I'll give you a clue, you won't get it. But we have a picture of Moses there representing the Bible. This little critter on the right, we have a Soviet Cold War era bomber and a molecule at the end. Anyone want to hazard a guess?
Earl Street water?
No, but close actually. Well, you'll find out in about 7 slides. You'll know exactly how those three four are related. So to me, internal moisture is really important. Or the control of internal moisture, building code clause E3 is really important, not just because I've had it lumped on my desk, but because it's really understated, and I'm always throwing my toys out the clock at work because it feels like seismic strengthening and fire get all the attention and we don't get enough. And because internal moisture control is really important, tiling and waterproofing is also really important. The people here are probably not the people that we need to appeal to, really. If you're making me come here, you're probably doing something right. And we need to get it right first time. So, does anyone remember this guy? Something you must do. Please don't leave me hanging. I'm not the oldest in this place.
L.V. Martin.
L.V. Martin, that's right. His motto was, it's the putting right that counts. But really, let's do it right first time, because it's the, it really touched on, it's the expense of fixing it up once it's already done. That is huge. So we've all seen images like this that feels like every week there's a new hospital or a school or some building somewhere hits the headlines and it's covered in black mold. It's always happening, and yeah, it's really a lot worse than we actually think. It's often dismissed as being an external leaky building problem, and it comes under the whole umbrella of the leaky building crisis, and it's often not caused by that. What about stuff like this? This is a bathroom. And you can clearly see all the black mould on the inside of the lining. So that's had a that's had a leak for some time, and it's been collecting black mould. Brands who are here, Building Research Association, have at least someone here. Every 5 years they do a housing condition survey. This was from their survey in I think 2018 or 2015, I'm not too sure. They found that 49% of all houses in New Zealand have visible mould. Okay, so pretty much half our houses have visible mould, which I think is appalling, and we'll get to it in a minute. We'll try and quantify how appalling it really is. Since then, they've done another housing survey, and that number has dropped. So for full disclosure, that number has dropped. Does anyone want to guess what it's dropped to? What the number?
42%.
42? No, 48%. So in 5 years we've improved 1%. And yeah, that's 5 years, so about another 200 years, we should have no black mould in buildings. So this is the problem here. It's actually quite a pretty photo. But Stachybotrys chartrum, black mould. Okay, this is a real problem, and this is a real bad piece of work. It's not like the mould on your cheese. This stuff produces, bear with me here, trichothiocene mycotoxins and atranthatones, which cause Stachybotrys toxosis. So basically, the mould that's growing on your walls releases spores, and these spores have chemicals in them. And this is where it relates back to one of the first photos, two of the photos in one of the first slides. These same chemicals were used by the Soviet Union on Afghanistan as chemical weapons back in the Cold War days. So these chemicals that are in these mould spores, the sickness is often called sick building syndrome. It's kind of a blanket term, but it causes headaches, fatigue, sore throats, skin irritations and rashes. It encourages dust mites, which we saw in that earlier slide, eczema, asthma attacks and other respiratory illness. You have 44% higher risk of depression if you're exposed to these toxins, and that was a Brown University study from 2007, and it's linked to pulmonary hemorrhage. It's the pulmonary part, it's always hard to say. Pulmonary hemorrhage in infants, and that's a CDC verified study. So black mould and its toxins are really bad, and we have a lot of it in our buildings. It's not an old problem. So as long ago as 35,000 BC, which is 5,500 years ago, ancient Sumerians used to use naturally occurring bitumen to protect their houses from rising damp, because they are aware of the problems that moisture in buildings can cause. Ancient Greek historian Herodotus, seen here in Stony, confirmed bitumen was used to prevent dampness in ancient Babylon. And even in the Bible, the book of Leviticus, it says if the mould has spread to on the walls, the priest is to order that the contaminated stones be torn out and thrown into an unclean place outside the town. If the defiling mould reappears, the house is unclean and must be torn down. So way back when, they used to know mould was a real bad issue. And we're still putting up with it. Admittedly, this was mainly external moisture, but they didn't have dishwashers and they didn't have internal showers in those days. And nowadays, we are bringing the water deliberately into our buildings. So we're kind of making the problem worse. So we know damp and mouldy housing is a leading cause of respiratory illness in New Zealand. This is a photo of of course it's a Dunedin flat, outside the shower. So you can just see the corner of the shower there, and this is the floor is black with black mould and rotted through. So it's causing a lot of respiratory illness. So let's kind of put some numbers around it. How much does respiratory illness cost New Zealand annually in direct health costs? So this is just the direct cost of you being in hospital or being treated by a doctor over a year. Now, anyone want to hazard a guess for a Snickers, a Mars, a Pixie Caramel or some M&Ms?
40 million.
40 million? Not even close. Higher? Higher?
Billion?
No, not quite. 575.6 million a year. So that's direct health costs. We already know our health system is under real stress. So I'm not saying that's caused solely by back mould, and I'm not saying that's caused solely by tiling or poor tiling. I'm not even close. But what I'm saying is every little bit helps, and if we fix some part, it's going to have some positive implications for the country. So that's just direct health costs. Let's talk about indirect health costs. This was an Otago University study from 2023, sorry. I don't know quite how they came up with what's a direct and indirect health cost, but it includes your lost productivity. If you die, it includes your funeral and whatever other costs get chucked into it. Does anyone want to have a guess? I'll give you a clue. It includes 575 million, so it's higher than that. Does anyone want to have a guess for a chocolate bar to within $1 billion? 10, pretty close. In fact, I'll give you a chocolate bar for that. 8.39 billion with a B. So that's a big cost, purely because of respiratory disease. And at least a part of that is avoidable if we manage internal moisture properly. So internal moisture control is really, really important. It's both the control of the free water and the condensation, like the water vapour in the air that condenses in our walls and on our surfaces. That contributes to mould. And E3, poor little fella here, is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting because the mechanics behind free water causing mould and condensation are completely different, and yet we only rely on one internal moisture clause of the building code. So buckle up guys, it's about to get insanely boring as I talk about the building code. So this is the building code triangle. It's not a particularly good graphic, I don't particularly like it, but we seem to throw it around quite a lot at NB. All it really shows is a hierarchy of where things stand. So at the top we've got the Building Act proper, and at the bottom we've got the lowest of the low, which would be the information. And E3, the building code clause E3, sits alongside 30-something other clauses in that second tier down. So these bits are mandatory. The Building Act and the Building Code. If you build a building, it must comply with the Building Act. Makes sense. It's a big document, the Building Act. It's about 400 and something pages. If I had to summarise it in 9 words, it would be keep it up, keep it dry, and keep it healthy. I don't know if we're doing all of that as well as we could. Below the Building Act we have the Building Code, and that's also mandatory. It says how a building must perform. So we are lucky in New Zealand, we have what's called a performance-based building code, whereby we don't tell you how to do it. We don't say you must build your house exactly like this. Another, how we actually deal with it is we say, when you build a house, it must meet these objectives. It must perform this way. And so the performance-based building code breaks it down into 3 parts. It breaks it down into the objective, which is to protect people and property from free water and condensation for internal moisture, for example. Then we have a functional requirement. Well, what does that mean? You construct to avoid mould, moisture accumulation and damage. So when you're damage from that moisture accumulation. So when you're getting your building consent assessed. That's what the BCAs are kind of thinking about, how it meets these performance criteria. And the actual, you have the objective, the functional requirement, and then the performance. Well, how do I actually do this? Make it impervious and easily cleaned. If anyone spent any time with the building code, or the building code clause E3, they will be sick to death of impervious and easily cleaned because it's thrown about quite a lot. And if there is water, if you do have water in your building, it's not a problem, just control it and get rid of it. Don't let it accumulate and cause mold. So it's really quite simple. But unfortunately, they kind of, this is where the wheels start falling off. So as a designer, I've been told, make it stand up, don't let it fall over, keep it dry, keep it healthy. What does that actually mean? What do I actually do? And this is where we get to this next tier here, the compliance pathways. And these are how you meet the building code. To start with, we have the first one here, the verification methods. These are generally calculations or some computer modelling. We don't have one for E3, so we don't worry about it. We will do. We're doing some work with brands at the moment, and we're hoping to have a verification, as a spoiler, a verification method at some time in the future. At the glacial pace that government work, I don't know when the future is, but we will have something for you. These are the acceptable solutions. We have 2 acceptable solutions. These are like the recipe. If you follow the acceptable solutions, you get a building consent. We have 2 of them. We have E3AS1, which has been mainly unchanged since it was written, however many years, 30 years, and is probably needing, or as we'll see, needs a fair bit of updating. The second acceptable solution is the IWAM Code of Practice, the Area Membrane Code of Practice. So we cite that as an acceptable solution compared to E3AS2. And this is how they compare. I've just got the 2 acceptable solutions here. E3AS1, it meets all the performance requirements of clause E3, allegedly, including internal moisture caused by vapour, condensation, E3.3.1, all the way through to E3.3.6. And it covers tiles and vinyl. Now, I've used little green ticks there that are smaller because it doesn't comply anywhere near as well as E3AS2. E3AS2 only really applies to the stuff shown there. It allegedly does vinyl, I'm not sure if it will, but it does tiles and it does free water and wet areas, and that's all it's supposed to do, but it does that really well. So if I was a tiler, I'd be insisting on using this. I support all our documents, nothing's wrong, but if it was me, I'd be using E3AS2 when I could. And then after that, if you don't use a verification method, which we don't have, or an acceptable solution, which we do have 2 of, anything else is called an alternative solution. Alternative solutions are, well, there's two things to alternative solutions. Firstly, designers and architects run a mile from alternative solutions because they think it's really hard. They're not really that hard. But alternative solutions is anything else. It's not a defined term, it's just anything that doesn't fit into the other 2 categories. You can demonstrate an alternative solution with the compliance of an alternative solution by saying, look, our design compares quite closely with a current document, like the acceptable solution. It might be in service history. For example, timber windows are an alternative solution, and they've been around for years. No one ever has a problem with accepting their usually. It might be an expert opinion or a producer statement. Basically, it's someone demonstrating something that it meets the code requirements, and that's accepted by the BCA. And so there's a lot of responsibility on the board consenting officers around some of these, and then we go all the way down. Alternative solutions, might be helpful, a product certification or a need determination. Then we're working our way down to the bottom now. Guidance under section 175 of the Building Act kind of assists compliance with the Act. Some people don't like it, they say it's lazy regulation. I quite like it in the sense that it's a good way of getting relevant information out to the industry quickly. Again, the glacial pace of government means sometimes guidance is better to get it's better to get something out early than have the whole industry waiting around for 18 months, 2 years, getting an acceptable solution out. So there is a place for guidance and also information, which might be the brand appraisals, which give the VCAs a reason to make their decision on reasonable grounds. So just to recap, we have a building code system in a lovely triangle. We have 50% of our buildings having mould. You know, black mould causes respiratory illness. You know, respiratory illness costs New Zealand Inc. a lot of money. So clearly we have a problem. E3 and the acceptable solution are doing a lot of heavy lifting, and they're probably getting near the end of their life, and they need a bit of an upgrade. This is a markup of just one page of E3. All the rest of the markups. It's not necessarily saying things are wrong. It's just questioning things. We have, assumptions in there. This has been around for ages, and we just don't know where they come from. For example, the 6% porosity of tiles in your wet areas. Why 6%? Where does that come from? So we had to do a bit of digging to find out the reasoning behind some of that. It has overflow, but it only covers other property. It doesn't really cover your property, so it's not really meeting the code. Containment, you might have heard about it. Is it sanitary fixtures? Is it sanitary appliances? Is it both? Floor wastes, they don't really align with it says align with the requirements of G13, but they don't really align with the requirements of G13 themselves, so we've got a little problem there. Water splash, we've got problems with that, clearly. It says that the tile manufacturer is going to recommend what adhesive or grout to use. I don't think anyone's ever rang your Italian tile manufacturer to find out what adhesive to use. There's, it states stuff like integrally waterproof, easy for me to say, integrally waterproof sheet. What does that mean? I think it means vinyl, but couldn't we just say vinyl or a linear sheet or something? Waterproof grout, they rely pretty heavily on waterproof grout. There are epoxy grouts, but does waterproof grout prevent gaps and cracks? It doesn't account for hydrolytic degradation, which is when you have two impervious layers and you have water between those two impervious layers stagnating for a long time, and it's either giving away oxygen molecules or taking oxygen molecules. I can't remember which way around it is, but it's not good. And scaling of splash with the acceptable solution assumes a dishwasher has as much splash as a shower over it, and that's not right. Maybe, I think it's Australia, they sort of rate the amount of splash required, so maybe we should start thinking about that. So these are mainly notes about stuff we need to look at. There are the odd thing that's wrong, and kind of markups of how we can improve this. And of course, in the bottom it says, in the course of intended use. Now, intended use is a defined term under the building code, and it's like, can't we do something better? So that is the acceptable solution. We are currently working through it. At some point, we will be updating it. Spoiler, updating waterproofing isn't as glamorous as, or isn't as clickbaity as doing something better. So sometimes it takes a back seat to catastrophic failures like earthquake design or fires. So we're struggling to get traction, but I think we're getting a bit of political will now, especially with the LVP stuff coming in for waterproofing. People are recognising you've got a problem, so that's good. It's not only with the acceptable solution, we have a problem with the building code as well. We say protect property from damage, but not your property, only the amenity for your property. So what does that mean? You've got to work out the objectives, meet the functional requirements, meet the performance requirements, which I touched on earlier. Does it include if we have a catastrophic failure of pipes, doesn't it? I mean, you can see it's just endless. And there's a whole lot of thinking that has to happen around this, and we are starting out on that, so bear with us. It's not as easy as it sounds. Every time you do something, there's always an equal and opposite reaction, really, isn't there? So, for example, let's take this wording, and a lot of you will cringe when you hear it, impervious and easily cleaned. This is a brand's drawing, so hopefully it's correct. What does impervious and easily cleaned mean here? Well, here's our easily cleaned layer, and here's our impervious layer underneath it. I don't know if the surface is impervious and easily cleaned. The system works well, don't get me wrong, but they're not impervious and easily cleaned. So you have to kind of do a lot of thinking around making the terminology match up as well. One of the recent updates we did to E3, I'm not saying we, I mean MB, was to remove some wet area finishes from the acceptable solution, such as cork tiles with polyurethane on them and some timber flooring finishes. That was a little bit controversial for some people. The reason we had to remove it was because it didn't meet the building code proper. So the acceptable solution said, hey, use cork tiles and slap on layers of polyurethane, but it didn't make an impervious and easily clean surface that met the durability requirements, which is B2. So you can still do stuff, you can still use cork tiles, as long as you can demonstrate impervious and easily clean. The acceptable solution won't be able to do that for you, but you can. Okay? There's ways and means. So we've got this impervious and easily clean layer. Well, what could possibly go wrong with that? Well, we could trap water under that tile and above that substrate. Because we're kind of touching on some of the stuff Brendan so kindly stole from me. Stole my thunder. So you can get moisture travelling through there, and these are unintended consequences. So for every part of the code for the acceptable solution we change, we have to think through these, what could go wrong and how can we fix it. This is a photo, another thermal image. This one's probably better than Brendan's other. This one was from a guy called Frank Modus, who's a waterproofer and a tester from Australia. He's on a standards committee with me. And this shows, again, the spot fixing of tiles and how you get the channels forming behind it. And again, you see D3.3.6 must be constructed in a way that prevents water splash from penetrating behind linings and concealed spaces. So clearly we have a concealed space here which will get penetrated by water. Now this is where we go back to something I mentioned earlier, the waterproof grout. Obviously your tiles are very rigid, and you've got two tiles together and you're grouting over the top of them and you're joining those two tiles with your grout, which is great. Everyone's happy. You can see on this thermal image though that grout is not touching that back wall, otherwise it was sharp as purple. So you've got the grout held between two rigid layers. It's your epoxy waterproof grout, but it's all built on a timber frame building, which we all know are quite flexible. It's one of the good things about timber frame buildings. They're flexible. So we've got rigid grout in the middle, all on a flexible substrate, and so it's going to crack and it's going to let water penetrate behind it. And so the simple way to prevent that obviously is, it doesn't really happen. This is another student flat. I think this is better than Brendan's one. It's got mushrooms growing. So obviously water's been coming under that, under those tiles, hitting the carpet and growing mushrooms in the doorway. A simple way to prevent it is water stops. And we'll touch on that. These are in required need 3 AS2 and AS 4740, which I'll touch on soon. Again, you have your easily clean layer, don't have a problem with that. You have your impervious layer, you don't have a problem with that. Now we have our water travelling back and forth in the substrate. We can contain that, and yes, look, you might get a little bit of water there, but you should be able to minimise that with your evaporation. So, I suppose the point of all this is to say we have to be quite thorough and go through at a really microscopic level to assess any unintended consequences that come through as we update things. We're also lucky now that we've got a thing called, well, first time I've ever said we're lucky to have it, but the building product specification, the BPS, which is basically saying now that any standard to be cited in any acceptable solution will have a mirror document which says any international standard that is equal to or equivalent or better than that standard we can also cite, and they'll be also cited. So we're going to have citations to a lot of additional standards which will only kind of give the industry a lot more information to rely on, and there's been a real information vacuum, and hopefully we're going to fill that. Next on the Standards Committee updating these, BD38, the Australian Standards Committee updating these standards. It says there's 4 up there, but in effect there's only 3. So AS 3740, AS 4858 on the far side is a material testing standard, and it's pretty much the same as the one in the middle, the AS 4654.1, which is the Australian version. They're almost identical. The only real difference is they use different sample shapes. So one uses a rectangular shape and it stretches it back and forth, and one uses a dog bone kind of shape and stretches that back and forth. So you get different readings. So the manufacturers have to do 2 different tests, essentially for the same stuff. Another interesting thing also with these material standards is when we test our waterproof materials, we test them for vapor permeability, we test them for water absorption, but we don't test them for water permeability. So essentially, we don't test if our waterproof membranes allow wet water to pass. But we test all sorts of other stuff. So that's all getting updated in 4654.1, and then that will replace ASNZS 4858, and we'll have just one standard for the material testing, and it's going to have all sorts of additional tests for the chemicals that are required. A lot of people are wanting tests for acid tests for some of the cleaners that are coming out now that use citric fruit juice and stuff like that, and orange peel, whatever it is, and also root penetration tests and stuff like that. So that's essentially the middle one and the far end one are going to become the same one. We're going to have AS 3740, which I'm not involved with. That one in particular, that's getting updated, and that's going to be your internal detailing. It's a pretty robust document at the moment, although some of their drawings are quite imaginative. Because we do things differently here to how they do in Australia. That's all getting fixed. And then AS 4654.2 is the external waterproofing one. So basically, we're working on it. and we hope, with your help actually, it's probably the people in this room that are the ones we want to really get reaching out to. We want to stop lawyers from being able to do this with our money, and we want to, it's my first little foray into AI, stop them doing this and then make them do that for the lawyer. So look, keep your eye out for, grants, MB consultations. Are people willing, if MB go out and ask you questions like, what do you think of this new standard? Will you respond to the consultation?
Yep.
Everybody, a lot of bobbing heads, great. Because that we really want to hear from the industry. Quite often it feels like the industry think we sit in our ivory tower thinking we know everything, and we really don't. The only time I've ever tiled is my splashback and all the grout's falling out. So, thanks for listening. I'm happy to take any questions, but also I want you to have your say. That's my email address there, without the say at the start, because I just copied the line down because I was too lazy back then. So richard.almand@nb.govt.nz. If you don't want to grab me at any break or talk to me, if you've got any feedback, it might be, hey, you guys are doing this terribly, or what about this standard, or any information, please just annoy me. And if you don't know how to annoy me, he's really good at annoying me. And we really want to hear from you guys. Okay? Any question? Who got the question right earlier? Do you want M&M's or M&M's Pixie Caramel?
Antoine's one.
Antoine's one as well. I'll tell you what, your table can have everything apart from the Mars bar, because that's my wife's favourite. No questions? Everyone's confident that the government's going to come into our place with basic fix. Good on. Thank you very much.